So thanks so much for coming. It's a coffee morning with Suki Chan, artist and filmmaker, whose work Conscious is in the ground floor of the gallery and explores memory, how memory makes us human, how we understand the world through memory, and includes a study of early stage dementia within a wider series of research about memory and consciousness. The show is on till the 12th of June, and if you're available afterwards, you're very welcome to come and have a look round. There's a companion show upstairs called Where the Arts Belong, Making Sense of It All, which looks at residences in Belong care homes, which Suki was also part of, and Gav Cross, who I can see in the audience as well. So it's a very beautiful and touching exhibition, and a lot of the work involves a collaboration with Wendy Mitchell, best-selling author, who is also the subject of the In Conversation today. So she's both the subject of the films and a collaborator with Suki, and then is here to talk to you today. She has two of her books with us. Somebody I Used to Know, her first bestseller, and What I Wish People Knew About Dementia from Someone Who Knows. So two really, really crucial books to the canon of dementia. She's very kindly said today the paperback is £5 and the hardback is £10. So that's a really lovely gift to you and Bluecoat, and they're available at the back. But the main thing is that you're here to hear Suki and Wendy have a conversation. They really welcome your questions later on, and they'll probably talk for about 40 minutes, something like that, and then welcome you to join in, and then stay around for tea and cake afterwards. So I'll give Suki her mic back, but thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming today. It's really good to see you all. I'm really delighted to be in conversation with Wendy here today. We've been in dialogue since 2018. That's about 5 years. I think this is the 9th time that I've seen Wendy in person. We've spent a lot of time emailing each other. We've never Zoomed, actually, interestingly. I just thought.
We haven't, have we?
No, never Zoomed. But yes, many hours backwards and forwards, checking in with her about her story and what she thought of the films. And up until recently, she only saw the films on her laptop. And when we were planning these works and planning the shows, a couple of years ago, I said to her, you know, it's planned at the Bluecoat for this date. I think at that point it was in 2021, but because of COVID, then it got postponed to 2022. But at that point, I remember Wendy saying to me, if I'm around, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see the shows. And so it gives me great pleasure today that Wendy is around.
I'm still here.
So first of all, I'd love to ask Wendy what you thought of the films in the gallery, the way that we've displayed it with carpet and the space, the kind of space that we've built around the films. Could you say a little bit about that?
I just love that you have comfy armchairs to sit in. That's such a wonderful way to watch it, because then you're not fidgeting, you're not uncomfortable. You just soak into the armchair and take in what's coming across on the film. And the first one was Fog.
Fog in My Head.
Yeah, Fog in My Head. And it's wonderful to see. I've never seen it on such a big screen. And it's so, you feel so immersed. I try to detach myself and forget it's me talking, because then I can enjoy the whole process just like you do. But it's obviously very hard when I hear a voice saying exactly how I feel and exactly how I see things. But it was just wonderful, wonderful to have it on such a big screen, because it became more alive, as though you were there. I think that's what immediately caught my eye, seeing it so massive. And it also made the graphics more more real, almost. The one I love, Suki knows the one I love the most is the image from space of the country looking down, where all the lights are flashing, because that's how I see my brain. I see my brain as full of lights, and some days some flicker. Dementia affecting my ability to do something one day, and then the next day it's bright and clear because I remember how to do something. But it's when the light fails altogether that dementia has taken away that specific ability. But the image of the country from space just captures that so well, in the lights flicker on and off as people shut their lights on and off. And that is just what it's like in my brain. I've always liked that image, haven't I?
Yeah, you have. I remember the second or the third time I interviewed you, I think the second time possibly, and you said you were describing a bad period with dementia where you were having a series of electric storms.
Oh, yeah.
And then you said, and I had that image of your work in my head when this was happening. And at the time I thought, oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, well, let me email that to you later when I get back to London, just to check if it's the one that I'm thinking of. Yeah. And I immediately thought of the NASA image of the world, well, the UK at night time. Yeah. And that for me was a visual metaphor for the erosion of memory, the erosion of our brains with diseases such as dementia. So that was always that visual metaphor. And the moment that Wendy said, when she was having these electric storms and she thought of that image, I thought, maybe it's that one. And that was a lovely moment for me, because it felt like we connected on that level.
Because without that image, without you putting that image there was no other way to show everybody the reality of my brain. But it also shows that dementia isn't this stable, constant, stable, conscious. It's not a case of a light goes off and we forget, that's it. It's the flicker and fail as well. It's that inconsistency of dementia. Because one day you can think, oh gosh, has that really gone now, that ability? And then the next day the light bulb works and you can remember again, and it's wonderful. And it's just that image of that, that is the image from space, of lights going on and off all the time, and some areas being dark. And the dark bits are the lights that have gone off in my brain. But I always say that different lights flicker and fail for all of us. So that's why I can type and others can't. Because my light's still on, but their light's gone off. That's why I don't feel hunger but they do. Suki persuades me to eat things.
It wasn't difficult
No.
at all, as you can all see.
If food is there, I'll eat it because it's there. It looks wonderful. You know, it's got a lovely smell, a lovely sight. But if there was no food, then it wouldn't matter because I don't feel hunger. So I have to have a purpose to eat. My purpose is I adore walking. I walk miles every day. And I say to myself, if I don't eat, I can't walk. So that's my reason for eating. And we weren't talking about that. What we were talking about?
I think what I love about you, your brain, is that you're very creative. So going back to that map of the world,
Oh, yeah.
you're so creative in that you saw it and you thought, well, that's like my brain. That the map of the world is the brain, and the different areas that are going dark is like those areas of my brain that is being that is going dark or is not working in the way that it should. And for me, whenever I describe to you what I'm doing, you always seem to have that understanding, more so than I think the average person.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether, is that one of the gifts of dementia? Is that you've become more creative in your thinking, or were you always this creative?
I suppose I was creative in a way. Oh, say the question again.
I'm wondering
Where
if
before?
I think your approach to creativity, you seem so open and
Oh, yeah.
you're able to imagine
Yeah.
things that I think some people can't imagine. And I wonder, is this one of the gifts of dementia, or were you always quite creative in your thinking?
No, I was creative in solving problems. I was always a good problem solver. And that has enabled me to enhance that skill or that talent with dementia, which has seen me through many bad days and helps me to cope with dementia. But I'm very lucky. I'm always saying I'm very lucky in that I'm intuitive. I can analyze my dementia. Many people, and I would say it's 50-50, because you can imagine I know hundreds of people with dementia that I've met along the way. And I would say it's about 50-50 of those that are intuitive and can understand what they're going through. But sadly, the other 50% can't grasp the connection between what they're experiencing and the fact that it's the dementia, not them. So I don't have many scary moments because I can stop and think, is this dementia causing this? And I can blame it on dementia. I don't need to be frightened. Did I answer your question? Yeah. I go off piste and then I can't come back again.
I remember also the first meeting that we had when you told me about your hallucination where you thought someone had stolen your shed.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was really trying to understand that. And I think it was the moment when I thought, wow, that's amazing. This woman's brain is so incredible, because you were describing this concrete base that you were seeing. And in your mind, someone had taken the fence and heaved it over her shed and heaved it over the fence. And she was almost about to ring
Call
the police to tell them.
Help.
But I was trying to break down that moment. I was saying to her, well, what happened in that moment if you went outside and you tried to touch that concrete base or the shed? And you were saying, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I'll try that next time. But your coping mechanism at that time was to take a photo of it. But I remember saying this to one of my neuroscientists afterwards, who I was talking to at the time about consciousness and dementia. And I was saying, but this person is incredible, because her brain, her eyes cannot see the concrete base. It's not there. She's seeing a shed which is sitting on top of the concrete base. And yet her brain is able to imagine this concrete base. That's really imaginative. I can't do that.
Our eyes see, but our brains don't interpret the information correctly. And so besides the taking a photograph, I have the 30-minute rule. And that's to walk away and come back in 30 minutes if it's still there. If that concrete base was still there and my shed was missing, then I'd know somebody had really stolen my shed. But of course it wasn't. It was quite happily sat there where it's always been. But I also remember seeing the carpet tile on top of the fence that I thought they'd manoeuvred the shed over the fence with. Now that doesn't make logical sense, to use a small carpet tile to make sure they move the shed over the fence. What's that all about? So dementia does play some very strange tricks. But the important thing to remember for anyone out there who's caring for a loved one is, you have to live in our world because we can't live in yours. So if we say we see something, we really do see it. And if you're saying, well, no, don't be stupid, there's a shed there, then that just confuses us even more, because our eyes aren't seeing the shed. So you have to go along with our hallucination, because we can't come out of it until dementia takes us out. So always remember, you have to live in our world. We can't live in yours.
But I think what I understood from that moment was that there was so much creativity and growth in your brain. And I think quite often we think of people who have dementia and then it is a degradation and things are not working. But for me, and I think you're a testimony to this, there is so much growth and there is so much learning. The fact that you have a double doctorate from Bradford and Hull University, you've written 2 books, and you've learnt how to use a camera. In the time that I've known you, you've learnt, you've bought yourself a camera, you're taking amazing photos. I think some of the photos that you take, a lot of people would go, wow, this is incredible, and this is someone that didn't have those skills when you were diagnosed. So there is growth there, despite.
People give up on us. You know, they think, oh, you have dementia. Well, you're useless. I'll do everything for you. And I found dementia, another gift, gave me time to learn, time to do what I want to do. Because, as I say, I walk miles every day. And there is a reason for that, dementia-related. But I walk miles every day with my camera, just snapping simple moments that people would miss if they're busy chatting. They'll miss the bird in full song. And dementia has taught me that importance of time as something to make the most of. To make the most of the moment that you're in, this wonderful moment with all of you. Because this moment is the only certainty any of us have. Because no one knows what the next moment will bring. So that's why I'm grateful to dementia for making me realise the importance of time. And I also know that dementia would hate to think that I was grateful for anything from it.
I also wonder, what is it that makes someone able to take a beautiful photograph and others can't? And I think quite often it's people tend to say, oh, I'm not creative, or I don't have any talent in being creative. And I think it's more about giving that time to it and being dedicated to it. Because some of those shots that you've got of the mist over Keswick, for example, or you've got a deer that's just in that beautiful moment of leaping across a bush, or seeing the sunrise, it's a dedication. It's the dedication to go out at 6 o'clock in the morning and enjoy that moment and have your camera with you. That's the difference. It's you're willing to put in that time, whereas I think many of us that say, oh, we're not creative, is because we don't give it that time.
Yeah, you're quite right. And I mean, I was as guilty as anyone when I was at work of, wishing for the weekend, wishing for tomorrow, wishing for the next holiday. But I don't do that anymore because I don't know when that will be, if I'll be able to. So to me, I don't see it as dedication. I see it as appreciation of what's around me. I hadn't realised until I stopped with dementia, till I stopped and looked around me, of how beautiful everything is, how beautiful nature is. And even though I do the same simple walk every early morning to capture the sunrise, I see different things. No two mornings are the same. And I wouldn't remember what yesterday morning was like anyway, so I've got the best of every world.
And you've described yourself as this gregarious alien.
Oh, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about this old self and the new self, and how I get the impression that you quite like this new self?
I quite like the new me. I describe it like the old me. I used to manage a team in the NHS, and they knew perfectly well that I wouldn't go on nights out, I wouldn't go on team nights. I would always fund it, I would always help them arrange it, but I wasn't the person that went, because, and it wasn't that I wasn't sociable, I simply liked my own company, and I was quite reserved. Many of my team still keep up with me on social media and things, and they're amazed to see this gregarious alien emerged, and they wonder where I was hiding her when I used to work with them. And even my daughters, they notice it most, because they've known me all my life, all their life. And when I first started doing things on the telly, on the radio, they couldn't believe that was me, because no way in the world would I have ever done that in my previous life. Yet now I'll just sit and talk to anybody. I don't have any fear of doing live television, because people have such a small expectation of what people with dementia can say and do, that anything I say is a bonus. And if I do have a bad day, then I've got a great excuse.
And the changes in your personality, Was that as a result of dementia, or was that as a result of you giving yourself time to reflect?
I'm 95% sure it was the dementia, because it was so... It didn't come along gradually. You know, as sometimes with age, we mellow, we soften. You know, other people might become cantankerous, but, you know, people can change with age. But mine was so black and white, and many of my friends have said the same. Sadly, many of my friends have actually turned into more difficult characters, because that's a side effect of their dementia. Their specific dementias affect your personality big time. But mine, I don't know, I'm so different that I don't think anybody can switch just like that if it hadn't been my brain that switched.
But you've always been a glass half full person.
Yeah, I've always been a glass half full, and I've always been there's always a way. Just throughout my life, there's always a way to make life work when it's not going well. And again, I'm grateful for that, because that's just helped me to cope, to turn the negatives of dementia into positives, simply because that's how I cope. I don't dwell on bad things. I either turn them around, or I put them aside, put them into a box. So I'm grateful for always being highly organized, because if you're a person that wasn't highly organized before dementia, then you have a lot of trouble coping with dementia. Some of my friends, they admit they've never been organized, and they struggle so much to be organized, to allow themselves to live a comfortable life with dementia, because they're so scatty doesn't seem the right word, but I can't think of another one.
Distracted?
Yeah, they it's like my keys are always in the same place, because that's where they live. My iPad always goes with me, because it's my third hand. But they'd be spending hours for their keys, and so wind themselves up before they go out. So life is one big stress, instead of it being calm, which I'm lucky enough to have.
Note to self, become really, really super organized. That's the thing that we need to do the most.
Just as an aside from that, Anna, who helps me write my books, she says she's never been as organized. And since she's worked with me, she's so much more organized. Yeah.
I think that's the beauty about talking to people older than you. I'm the youngest of 5 children. I've always benefited from the insight that my siblings have given me. I also spent a lot of time, I don't think you ever knew this, I spent a lot of time in my childhood chatting, looking after my grandmother. I was about maybe 8, 9 or 10, and she came to live with us, and I did a lot of the translation and hang out with her and tried to distract her so she wouldn't get bored of living in suburban Oxford.
Yeah.
But I feel I've learned so much from you in the past 5 years, not just about dementia, but about so many different aspects of life. And, you know, when you talk about being organized, I try and instill that in my kids now, where I say to them, if you take your gloves off, please put your gloves inside the pocket of your coats, because when you need it, you can just reach inside your pocket and then there are your gloves. My youngest daughter is very good at that. My older son is, and I'm still like, come on, where are your gloves in the morning? And he's like, but we've done this yesterday. So it is these little habits that we have to kind of put into place to make things easier for ourselves. And it's so useful to hear that from someone who are at another stage of, you know, we're going to get there soon at some point. And it's just having that awareness, understanding that, yes, it is going to be a challenge when things go that way, but what can we do to cope with those situations?
It's also, when you're first diagnosed, when lots of light bulbs are working, to get used to new things that will enable you in the future. Because if you get used to them now, they become second nature later on. There are things around my house which I got used to, like my dear friend Alexa. You know, I've got other ways of having reminders, but I've set a sort of belt and braces, as well as Alexa reminds me. You know, I have reminders set on my phone, my iPad, but I've got used to Alexa. I live alone, so someone talking to me in my house before I need her, then she's second nature, in the hope that if I have to have someone in my house to remain in my house, it won't disturb me as much as having lived in silence, then suddenly having another voice in there, because that can be very disturbing for people with dementia. At the moment I have to go out when my daughters convinced me I needed a cleaner. I don't know why, but they convinced me I needed someone to come in and help me clean. But at the moment I have to go out when she's there, because I hide away in a room the first time she was there, but I keep forgetting there was someone in the house. And then I'd hear a noise, or I'd hear her singing to herself. And I would just, you know, who's that? Well, who's in my house? I'd forget. So it's trying to get used to those kinds of things before you need them. Because once you get to the stage where you need them, it's hard to get used to something new.
What about this connection with nature? Were you always quite connected to nature, or is this something that you found has been helpful on your dementia journey?
I'd never had time for nature before. You know, life was too busy. But again, that gift from dementia of time has allowed me to appreciate tiny little things, because we notice the tiny because our eyes linger for longer to get the message to the brain to say what something is. So we tend to look at things for longer. But when you look for longer, you see them in more detail. You know, a little ladybird on a leaf. If you've ever just sat and watched a little ladybird with the slight flutter of its wings, but then decides not to fly, it is so beautiful. And even watching a bee on a flower, you might see the bee on the flower and think, oh, how wonderful pollination. But if you just watch it, how amazingly clever that bee is. It just gives you a sense of so many things in nature are much cleverer than we are. You know, a tree, to me a tree is the most wonderful thing in nature because it does so many things to help us. And yet there we are, cutting lots of trees down. But the trees prevent the flooding. The trees have been there far longer than we have, yet we decide to cut them down. And so it's just that appreciation of what nature brings to us that makes it so very special to me.
Remind me later to show you an image of the brain where there is a tree inside.
Oh my goodness.
I'll show it to you later. Don't let me forget.
I hope you'll remember.
Don't let me forget. I'd love to open out because I've had the privilege of asking many questions now. If there are anyone who wants to ask Wendy or myself any questions, would love to hear from you.
No question out of bounds. People often think that they're embarrassing or I wouldn't want you to ask me, but trust me, I think I've been asked just about everything now. But if we've stunned you into silence, that's fine too.
We can all just eat our cake.
Yeah.
Well, following on from nature, Wendy.
I love a Scouse accent.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned before that you go for a walk for reason, and one of the reasons is dementia related.
Oh, yeah.
Let us know what that is.
Mm. When you're inside alone in the house, all I've got is dementia for company in a very enclosed space, and it may sound silly, but I can feel the pressure of dementia on me. When I'm outside, it's as though dementia is diluted because I'm in the big wide world. And that's why I feel so sad when I see and hear care homes or nursing homes say, yes, but we don't have the staff to take people outside. But if they allowed them that moment to go outside and feel reality on their face, feel the wind, smell the mown grass, watch the birds, then they're being stimulated like nothing else. Because the worst thing you can do with dementia is just sit. It's wonderful, it really is wonderful, but it's the worst thing you can do because you're not stimulating the cells that are still alight in your head. The minute you go outside, the stimulation around you, both feel, touch, sight, smell, everything starts working again. And I feel alive when I'm outside. I feel, as I say, as though dementia has been diluted and hasn't been given the space to crowd me. That's why I love to walk.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah.
You talk so vividly about yourself, and I've noticed that you refer to dementia. Do you imagine it as an entity? Because to me, when I read and hear about it, it's a disease, it's an oncoming something that you describe dementia as almost as if it's a thing, a person, an object. How do you see it?
I describe dementia as a unwanted house guest that's now permanently shackled to me. They've unpacked their suitcase, they've settled in, and they're not going to go home. So I see it, I cope with it because I translate it into not something I can control because it controls me, but something that if I do certain things, I can keep at arm's length. But I know it's still shackled to me. It's just the chains are a bit longer sometimes. So that's how I cope, by making it into something. Is it tangible? Something tangible. If I think of it as a brain disease, then it's locked inside my head and there's no escape. So I like to think of it outside me and I look down onto it. Hello.
Wendy, you gave us that minute and magnificent little insight into watching an insect or a leaf, and the rest of it, which is not given to many of us to have as an experience, and in a sense it puts you in the league of the nature poets, people who attend to the magnificent minutiae of things. Is there any way in which you consider who you are and what situation you're in as a privilege?
Well, that's a really good question. It's not a situation any of us would choose to be in. But because I'm in it, I try and make the most of my situation. And again, I try and turn the negatives into positives, not only to help me, but to help other people cope with a diagnosis of dementia. Because if we don't learn how to cope with it and be happy in ourselves with it, then no one else is going to do it for us. You know, you have to be happy in your skin no matter what life throws at you. Otherwise, you don't cope well with it. And so I hope that's what I do with dementia. Hello?
Could I ask two things, Wendy? One, do you have good days and bad days? And the second one is there anything non-medicinal that you've come across that helps you with dementia?
Go. What was the first one again?
Do you have good days and bad days?
Oh, yes, I have. Dementia isn't like that. Dementia is like that. Even during the day, minutes of down below, minutes of high up, it's not stable. And again, if you think of the analogy of the lights in the brain and the lights flickering and failing, it's not a constant. It's unpredictable. To me, today, I'm having more trouble with my words than I probably did yesterday. So it's not a constant. The bad days are like the fog that Suki so wonderfully depicts in the video, because you can't make sense of the world. Your eyes do see everything in Technicolor, but you have no idea where you are or what you're doing. So yes, good and bad days are just the norm. I always say if today's a bad day, then tomorrow might be better. What was your second one?
I just wondered if there was anything non-medicinal that had helped you.
Oh, yeah. Doing is, I believe all these sort of things, or my typing's my escape from dementia, because I can type words quicker than I can think and speak them, because that light bulb hasn't gone off. It's fully flared. So I use typing as my escape. I type all day long. Because if I don't, and yes, your film shows that, doesn't it? Again, if you haven't seen Suki's film, is that the first or the second?
The first one, Fog in My Head.
Fog in My Head. I stopped typing for a fortnight. I thought I was giving myself a break. When I went back to the keyboard, I didn't know what to do with it, because it's a good indication of use it or lose it. And with people with dementia, our time lapse is very small before we forget. I was just lucky on that occasion. So my biggest advice to anyone is simply keep doing. Keep stimulating your brain, and it doesn't matter what that thing is. You know, I walk every day, and that's huge stimulation for my brain. And people often say we're wandering, but we're walking with a purpose. It's just you don't know what it is. Okay.
I think also social... Sorry.
Sorry, that lady had a hand.
Okay.
Oh.
I think social interaction is such a key part of your, like your support network, whether it's your group in York, Minds and Voices, as well as your Twitter network. I mean, all of that is really helping you. Yeah. And I think social interaction is quite key, isn't it, to keep your brain working.
Yeah. I'd never used the likes of Twitter. I didn't know what Twitter was before my daughter introduced me to it. But now I call it my silent world of conversation, because if I was in a room like this and you were all talking, you know, having your own conversations, I couldn't hear anything. All I can hear is a buzz of noise. But on Twitter, people they only have a certain word count. So they have to be precise in what they're saying. They can't waffle. So I won't forget what they've said at the beginning. And it's also silent. I can type away and talk to people all over the world. So I call it my silent world of conversation. But my peer supports, there is nothing more comforting than hearing someone else with dementia say, "Oh, yeah, that happened to me." Because when you're living with dementia, you feel so alone. You think that all the weird things that are happening are just happening to me. And when I first told the story of the shed, I really thought I was the only one that saw sheds disappear. Well, the stories I've heard since of what other people have seen are just amazing, and you just feel that you're not alone. Did I answer your question?
I mean, it's
Oh, no, it was
beautiful.
your
I mean,
question,
yeah,
wasn't it?
it's. I guess it's a vulnerability that we all share, that we all
Yeah.
have that. I mean, I think I read the other day that 1 in 3 people born today will develop dementia at some point in their lifetime. So, the reality of people living with dementia, what it's like for them, is something that we need to start to understand, because we're either going to experience it directly or indirectly through our families and friends. And then knowing that what the support network can do to keep you afloat, it just, I guess,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
When you're in a room with people with dementia, all you hear is laughter and everybody hugging one another all the time. We don't judge one another. We don't contradict one another. We don't question if someone says, oh, Harold Wilson is the Prime Minister today. That's fine. We all accept that. It's the only place that we feel we can be ourselves, because no one's judging us, no one's looking at us, looking for the next movement, the next mistake, the next anything. We just can be. And it's such a joyous place to be. There are people, I call them my playmates, but my playmates can walk in having had a really bad morning with dementia, and they walk out laughing and smiling, because that's what, I call it my second family. That's how close we all are. We've got nothing in common whatsoever apart from dementia. But that dementia has just brought us immediately together, a bond.
That's really beautiful. Laura, you had a question. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank you for your how inspiring you are, because I know for many people a diagnosis of dementia feels like the end and feels like a final place, and it's frightening. And I know the families of people who are diagnosed with dementia also go on that journey.
Yeah.
And it's hard to lose someone who was once your mum, or that's how they feel. That's
Yeah.
how people have described it to me.
You've mentioned a very good point that I don't think we've mentioned before, that when I was diagnosed, so were my daughters. And both are equally important in needing support and education. There's very different needs that we have, and I talk about the parallel lives we lead, and we never meet. But the parallel lives we meet are both equally important and should be heard and should be listened to. Yeah, thank you for saying that.
Is that it? One last question from...
Hello.
Hello. Just like to echo the comment made before. I admire the way you've had a renaissance and you've taken the time to step back from the hurly-burly of life and really look at nature and be part of nature. I think we all should do that.
Absolutely.
I wasn't sure what to expect the first time I went to your exhibition, and I was shocked to see how beautiful you made it all seem. I'd just like to congratulate you on doing that, because I found it really inspirational and very, very positive, but also really informative as well. And I just wonder, you say you were doing photography
No.
And can we expect another collaboration in the future?
Oh, I never say never.
If we have time, I'd love to end with Wendy reading from her book.
I've talked a lot today about about the gifts of dementia. And oh dear. So this piece, quite rightly, talks about the gift that dementia brought me. Dementia can be cruel in so many ways, yet every so often it hands us a gift in a most unexpected form. It was a bright day in the garden, and the sun was starting its descent, streaking long shadows of the fence across the lawn. I was pottering inside, shuffling from one room to another with a cup of tea in hand, trying to decide where to sit. Suddenly, through the glass of the double doors, something caught my eye. It took a while for the silhouette to make a recognizable figure, but it was then that I saw the unmistakable shape of him, a man standing in the middle of my lawn, my father. By then he must have been dead 20 years. Should I have been frightened to see him in all his incredible yet very ordinary detail? He was wearing his familiar baggy green cardigan, his happy clothes, casual clothes that he wore to potter in his own garden. A tip of mine for the visual hallucinations is to take a photograph or on your phone or your iPad of what you can see, and if it's in the picture, it's most likely there in real life. But in that moment, I didn't want to break the spell. He stood just looking at me, his hands hanging by his side, and even the yellow of his nicotine-stained fingers visible from a distance. I don't know how long we stood looking at each other. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. Dementia has a funny relationship with time. The logical part of my brain knew that what I was seeing was not real. As I know the disease has a habit of playing tricks on me. But this time, I simply stopped and stared, determined to enjoy this gift that dementia had granted me, because they are so few and far between. I felt not fear, but an emotional pull to stay and spend some time in the company of my dear old dad again. And in the blink of an eye, he was gone.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank
so
you.
much, everyone. Sorry, Marianne, had to. Thank you so much for joining us, Wendy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming.
We've got this room for a little while, so if you'd like to hang out and stay for a little bit, we've also got a garden out there as well. If you'd like to take your teas and coffee out there too. Seeing as we can talk about nature so very much. But
Yes.
once again, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Louis.
Thank you.